The evening air was rich with the aroma of roasted chicken as Maria and I hosted a family dinner in our warm suburban home. The table was beautifully set, candles flickered gently, and a soft murmur of conversation filled the room. Our closest friends, Mike and Jenna, had joined us along with my mother, Eleanor. Maria, glowing with excitement, shared the news as we sat down to eat. "We're expecting a baby," she announced, her smile brighter than I had ever seen. Mike and Jenna cheered, raising their glasses in celebration. "That's wonderful news." Eleanor's voice carried a strained enthusiasm, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She reached out to pat Maria's hand, the gesture feeling hesitant. As the evening wore on, I noticed Eleanor's smile falter when she thought no one was watching. At one point, she whispered something to Maria, too quiet for me to hear, but I saw Maria's smile waver just for a second. The night was filled with laughter and stories, but as the sun set, Eleanor's mood seemed to darken. After dinner, as we cleared the table, Maria, tired from her pregnancy, excused herself and headed upstairs to rest. Eleanor followed, saying she needed to use the bathroom. Then came a loud thud, followed by a scream. My heart froze. I raced upstairs to find Maria crumpled at the bottom of the stairs, her face twisted in pain. Eleanor stood nearby, pale and trembling. "It was an accident, David," she slipped. She stammered, her hands shaking. Maria clutched her abdomen, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, David," she pushed me. She said this child should never have been conceived. As Mike dialed 911, Jenna and I rushed to comfort Maria. The sound of distant sirens echoed in the night, but the storm inside me was far louder. My mind struggled to process what had just happened, the horror of realizing the hatred my own mother had concealed. When the paramedics arrived, Maria was carefully placed on a stretcher, her hand gripping mine tightly. I made a silent vow as she was wheeled toward the ambulance. No matter what, I would protect my family. Eleanor watched from the doorway, her expression unreadable as the distance between us grew into a chasm I knew would never be bridged. In the sterile light of the hospital, I paced beside Maria's bed, the steady beeping of the monitor a small comfort that our unborn child was safe. The doctors reassured us Maria would physically recover, but the emotional wounds were harder to heal. The image of her falling, of Eleanor standing over her, haunted every quiet moment. A few days later, I returned home to gather some of Maria's belongings. In the attic, I stumbled upon a stack of old letters. As I read through them, the words on the pages made my stomach turn. They were from my mother, written to an old friend, filled with disdain for my marriage to Maria. She had expressed her desire to prevent the birth of her mixed-race grandchild, her words dripping with hatred. Armed with the letters, I confronted Eleanor. She sat in her usual chair by the fireplace, a book forgotten on her lap. Her eyes, once warm, were now cold barriers. I held the letters up, my hands shaking. "Why, Mom? How could you?" Eleanor took the letters, her hands trembling as she read aloud her own words. "I did it for us, David. For our family's future. To protect our legacy." "Our legacy?" I nearly choked on the words. "There is no legacy worth preserving if it's built on hate." Eleanor's face crumbled as she tried to reach out. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could change things, make you see." "See what?" "That your prejudice is justified." My voice rose, incredulous. "No, Mom. I can't let you hurt my family anymore." Eleanor's tears flowed as I turned to leave, her cries fading into the background as I packed a bag for Maria. The drive back to the hospital was a blur, the city lights flashing. As I grappled with the betrayal, word of what Eleanor had done began to spread through the community. Neighbors who once greeted her warmly now crossed the street to avoid her, and her friends from the book club stopped calling. The isolation that surrounded her was of her own making, and though harsh, it was necessary. At the hospital, Maria began to wake. I held her hand, the connection between us stronger now, forged in the fires of what we had endured. "We'll get through this," I promised, my voice steady, a vow not just for the present, but for the future and our growing family. The decisions we faced were difficult, distancing ourselves from Eleanor. But they were necessary. Our focus was on healing, on rebuilding. Eleanor's choices had led her down a path of loneliness and regret, and as hard as it was to accept, we had to move forward. For us, for our child, for our future. In the quiet sanctuary of our home, Maria's strength amazed me. Though she was still recovering, her resolve was clear. "We can't let her hurt anyone else," she said, her voice firm with determination. Together, we crafted a plan to bring Eleanor's actions to light. We reached out to a well-known local journalist, one known for her integrity and commitment to social justice. Over the phone, Maria recounted our story, her voice steady but heavy with the pain of betrayal. The journalist was intrigued and sympathetic, agreeing to meet. Preparation for the interview became our shared mission. We gathered the hateful letters, documented Maria's injuries, and collected messages of support from neighbors and acquaintances who had witnessed or experienced Eleanor's prejudice. Our friends Mike and Jenna stood by us, helping us organize the evidence. "You're doing the right thing," Jenna said as she helped sort through emails. Mike nodded in agreement. It's time her true colors were shown to everyone. The day of the interview arrived. Miss Hammond, the journalist, set up her recorder in our living room, her demeanor professional yet compassionate. Maria spoke first, recounting the incident, the discovery of the letters, and the impact of Eleanor's actions on our lives. I followed, sharing my perspective, my voice heavy with the weight of a son's betrayal. "I never imagined my own mother could harbor such hatred," I admitted, the gravity of the situation hanging in the air. Miss Hammond listened carefully, occasionally asking questions that cut straight to the heart of the matter. When the interview concluded, she packed up her equipment and promised, "I'll make sure your story is heard. You're not just speaking for yourselves, but for everyone she's hurt." The article went live a few days later, its impact immediate and explosive. Local media picked it up first, and soon after, national outlets followed. Eleanor's racist actions, once hidden behind closed doors, were now exposed for all to see. The community's reaction was swift. People who had once respected her were now her harshest critics. Her reputation, built over decades, crumbled overnight. Eleanor reached out to us, her messages filled with a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. But the damage was done. Her standing in the community was shattered, her social circles closed off, and the public outrage ensured she could no longer wield her prejudice without consequence. Maria and I watched as the story unfolded, a mixture of relief and sadness washing over us. We had exposed the poison that had festered in the shadows, but it had come at the cost of a family torn apart. Yet, in this newfound quiet, we found our strength. Our commitment to each other was renewed, our bonds unbreakable, and our resolve to protect our family stronger than ever. The weeks following the article were tumultuous, but it was necessary. Eleanor, once a respected figure in our community, now faced the harsh reality of her actions. Neighbors who once greeted her with smiles turned away in disgust. Unable to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with her revealed prejudices. Her friends distanced themselves, unwilling to endure the social ostracism that came with being associated with her. She eventually put her house on the market, the forlorn for sale sign standing stark against the manicured lawn, a symbol of her precipitous fall from grace. Amidst these upheavals, Maria and I made a decision for our future. We packed our belongings, hearts heavy but hopeful, and moved to a new city, one celebrated for its diversity and inclusive spirit. Here, we found open arms and welcoming hearts, a community that accepted us without hesitation. Our neighbors celebrated the richness of diversity, understanding that the fabric of a community is strengthened by its varied hues, not in spite of them. Inspired by our experiences and the lessons we had learned, Maria and I became advocates for racial tolerance and family safety. We spoke at community centers and schools, sharing our story, not to reopen old wounds, but to prevent others from enduring similar pain. Our message was clear. Hate, if allowed to fester, can destroy families and communities. But awareness, empathy, and proactive kindness can heal and protect. As our new life took root, we welcomed the birth of our child, a beautiful, healthy baby boy. Holding him in my arms in the quiet of the nursery, with Maria resting beside me, I felt the weight and lightness of our journey. In this peaceful room, with the soft hum of a city that embraced all, I reflected on the painful but necessary path we had walked. Cutting ties with my mother was the hardest decision I had ever made, but as I looked down at my son, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful slumber, I knew it was the right one. We had chosen a future where love wasn't bound by blood or biased by heritage. A future where our son could grow up knowing that his worth wasn't tied to the color of his skin, but to the content of his character. In this new beginning, I found closure. The pain of the past, while not forgotten, was now overshadowed by the joy of the present and the promise of the future. We had stepped away from the toxicity to protect what was most precious: our family, our future. As our son grew, he would learn of our journey, not as a tale of sorrow, but one of strength, of the unyielding power of love over hate. In the quiet moments between the soft coos and gentle smiles of our child, Maria, and I shared a look of deep understanding. We had weathered the storm and, in its wake, found not just survival, but life, thriving, unabashed, and unafraid. Now that our story has come to a close, I leave you with a question. Do you believe cutting ties with family is justified if it means protecting your own? It was not a decision David and Maria made lightly, and it's a reality many might face under extreme circumstances. What would you do in their shoes? Please share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below.